Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Great. Okay, should we get started?
Sure.
Okay. So sharing my screen. For anyone new, feel free to introduce yourselves and feel free to fill out the attendee list. Okay, moving on, we can just get straight into it. The first item is moving Scorecard to Firestore.
Obviously I was the one I wrote a design doc to that. It's purely for I shared the design doc probably on Tuesday. Azim and I have been discussing about that, at least in the design doc, which is open. Would appreciate people to look at it, give feedback to it. The whole idea is the gist of it is right now we store every different combination in each subdirectory within the bucket. That becomes extremely complicated as we maintain. The whole idea is to, hey, now I want to store by commit SHA so that I can go retrieve by commit SHA. I want to store by dates. I can go retrieve by dates. I want to store by release idea. Then this duplication of all of this data, and essentially maintaining that is going to become cumbersome. The second thing on that is also the goal is to extend, if we want to extend our API to add query capabilities, not just straightforward with any kind of query capabilities that we want. Example, very simple example that I can think of is, I want to get all repositories of Eclipse Foundation. That's the simplest, because I want to know how is Eclipse Foundation doing. Right now, we don't have a way to provide the data then going to BigQuery. Also, another critical reason is like people have started utilizing our API because there was an issue that came up in Scorecard, which essentially said, hey, we want to run 2,000 plus scans using the API, and those are the motivation to go do that. And I got feedback from Azim, or at least on a couple of things. One is, if you don't mind, can you open the doc? There's on that. If you go back to the, yes.
Oh, this Google Doc?
Yeah, the Google Doc, please. I wrote, Azim gave specific feedback as to we need a plan of action of how to move whatever. If you scroll down a little bit further down, please. Yes. On this specifically, how do we move the existing historical data into Firestore? That's one action item that I do have on that to update. What is the game plan to do that? This is essentially saying why, where are the code changes for this, to essentially say, hey, this is where we need to change in the cron job. We need to change in GitHub badges. Where do we have to change? And also, where do we have to change on the API? This is essentially this. Not my proposal is not to have a discussion in this meeting in depth, but the whole idea is to get more people to read that and give feedback to it. I would probably want to make a final decision by next biweekly, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to go read and give feedback to it.
Is this doc linked from the issue itself?
No, it's not, because the reason, oh yeah, that's a good point. We can probably do that. I posted on the, if essentially anybody who's on the Scorecards dev GitHub sorry, not GitHub, Google group, they would have got these. They should be able to comment on these things. It'd be probably a good idea to add that to the issue.
Great. Okay. Anything else on that one?
Does anybody else have any comment? I want to wait before we move on to the next item.
Sure.
I just wanted to bring up that comment I had on I have also added this on the doc. I think moving to Firestore is fine, but I think we probably want to ensure that it's actually we're moving for a reason, right? Like I don't
Absolutely.
think I don't think saying, hey, let's move to Firestore and then figure out what is the usefulness of it is worth doing, because just moving to Firestore itself is it's a lot of work. So let's figure out what exactly is the thing that we are solving, because that's the only way we'll know if moving to Firestore solves our problem the way we want to solve it, right? Like
I agree, Azim. I totally agree on that. So, like I mentioned in that, if we don't have a data plane, our data plane is multiple copies of it being multiple files. That's one like example. I want to add the release information now. That has to, coming back to a little history behind that, is like if you want to go say, one of the issues in Scorecard is go get release information. So essentially people can go say, hey, I have this Kubernetes 1.23, what was its state at that time? So for doing that right now, what would happen is it's very easy to extend Scorecard to go fetch the data. Now we need to make a copy of the same results with that path being tagging within the Scorecard results to go add this release information, and our API to go say, if I want release information, I need to go look at this path. So essentially, we can do only one-to-one. We don't have the capability of one-to-many to say, let's keep very simple, like I mentioned, as to I just want repositories from an organization. Very simple query. That is not possible right now, unless we have a different way to solve this problem.
Yeah, I get that, right? I think my point being, so let's take the release information, for example. I don't think moving to Firestore is going to solve the release information issue by itself, right? Like if the release information thing is the use case we want to solve, I think there's a bunch of things that need to be done to actually solve that and not just move to Firestore. Right. So my point being that if the only thing we want is an index on the scorecard data, there are multiple different databases that we can use to actually
Sure,
index it.
absolutely.
So
I
unless we
agree.
unless we actually start with what is it that we are trying to solve and like what are our requirements, how do we actually know the solution that we are proposing solves the problem? Like I think purely moving to Firestore and then saying we can do all of these things is like, I think it might be just wasted effort unless we know
Okay.
what exactly we're trying to solve.
Okay. I want to take that 5 minutes. I agree. The reason being, why not use a SQL store? Why not use SQL store versus a document store? Because we are JSON based, Firestore easily allows us to add new stuff. So we don't have a way to, we don't need to create additional stuff. The reason, or your second question or your first question, if you want release information, this should not be, I agree, doing release information, we need other plumbing of other stuff. But if we don't have underlying, so now if we go add release information now, it adds more complexity to the code. And also, so if we have a proper storage with indexing capability by just adding a tag to my result set, then it becomes easier to add feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. That's the fundamentals behind doing this versus going and jumping and doing the release information, if that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm just using the release information as an example, right? So what
Sure.
I mean is if we know if you start with what is the exact API that we actually want to
Sure.
expose, then it's easier to build a solution to say, hey, here's what the database is going to be. It might actually be Firestore, right? Like Firestore might be the right solution, but it allows us to go and say, hey, here's the thing, here's the schema that's going to look like, here's what we're going to index. We're going to have a much more cleaner design to say what exactly are we solving, and we also know that the solution actually solves the problem that we are looking for. Right now, we are purely saying, let's move to Firestore because it gives us these indexing capabilities. And then we'll figure out what extra APIs we can add on that, right?
Sure. Okay. So I will add specifically, hey, these are the APIs that I'm thinking of, and then we'll go back to saying, does this meet this? I agree. I will go. That's on my part to answer that question, and obviously the other part of how do we migrate the existing data from here to there, and your third question as to what happens when this collision being, if I have for folks who don't know, if you read through the doc, you'll be able to understand. If cron runs and cron also has the same commit SHA, and webhook also has the same commit SHA, what happens? Which one overrides which one? Right now, because we stored in two different buckets, it's not a problem. That's a valid question. I'm going with that. Whichever is the latest is going to override the other one. But we'll have to figure out why and what are the implications of doing that. But that's a valid point on that. But I will answer those questions. I'm hoping by next bi-weekly we should have these answers, so we can decide which way we want to go. Perfect. Thanks, Aziz.
Great. Okay. We okay to move on to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one is 2374. Let me open that.
Perfect. This is on the rate limiting. This is somebody who came from the community and say, hey, we would need some rate. Is there a rate limiting? This is great. We don't have any specific docs as to say any rate limiting is there. By the time Azim answered that question and closed that issue, but I also added a specific item on that. If you don't mind, can you go to the docs? Azim, we should probably have publish some metrics. It'll be helpful from OpenSSF perspective, how are people using our API? It'll be nice to have that information.
Do you mean publish like publicly or for maintainers? Because
but probably say 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, for publicly, even anytime, because it'll help people say, okay, this information is there. It'll be helpful. How much are people really using that information?
Sure. Yeah, I can't comment on the publicly part because I'm not super sure how to do that, but I can later show you
Okay, sure.
how we can like access this data. But we have all the API metrics.
Sure, great. So probably it can even be 6 months down the line, we write a blog post saying, hey, this is what people are doing. But it'll be nice to have that from OpenSS's perspective. That it is nice to have that how are people using this. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on. The next one is mine, scan between two releases. So let me open that. This one is similar to one that Azim, I know we've talked about, the commit depth flag. So we discussed having commit depth available would make it helpful to be able to do scans between two releases. And so this issue is, hey, what if we had Scorecard able to actually do that? So this was just an example. We could add a flag, diff release, we could call it something else. You could put in two different releases and have Scorecard be able to scan all the commits between the two releases.
So I think my first question here is, how do we define a release, right? Because I think we are assuming that a release technically means a git tag. Is that it? Because I don't think that's it's necessarily true. I think projects can choose to do releases in various ways. Like for example, Kubernetes is a pretty good example. So the way they do their releases is each major version has a separate branch, and they make a new commit to it every time they want to patch it or have a minor release to it. Right. So I think my only like comment here would be that the concept of a release based on a Git tag, I don't think is generic enough um, to be applied across the open source ecosystem. That's one of the reasons we've been sticking with commit SHA, because that's something that no matter what you do, you have to have a commit SHA, and that's what we honor. So yeah, that's just the first comment.
Okay, yeah, that's a good example. But I would argue that for GitHub, using the GitHub features, the release tag is a GitHub feature. Everything we're utilizing is like using the GitHub API. So if they're choosing not to use, perform releases like with the GitHub standard, it wouldn't be captured in this, but I think it still would be helpful for the projects that do utilize release tags.
Carolyn, I have a comment on that.
Mhm.
There's recently a PR, somebody did a PR for GitLab, which specifically solves GitLab problems, like for GitLab, not just GitHub. I know we are primarily owning GitHub. I have a similar consensus like what Azim has. When we extend this to GitLab and other repositories, then we need to have feature flags saying, if GitHub do this, if not GitHub don't do this, is extremely cumbersome to maintain. So that is another caveat that we got to think about when you say, hey, this is GitHub version. GitHub, I agree, we primarily right now at the GitHub, but we also have to think about those things, unless you have a different thought process during that for that.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much at GitLab, so I'm not sure if they have the concept of release tags as well. But if they do, it could be like the GitLab version of releases as well. But that's a good point. I think if we do want to stick with commit SHA, perhaps we could have a flag that lets you scan from one commit to another. But essentially it would be the same as the commit and commit depth. Go ahead, Azim.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar comment about if the only thing that we care about is the Git tag itself. I guess all we are really doing is an extra step of saying how does the Git tag, what Git SHA does a Git tag point to, right? And continuing our analysis. So I would still say that we need to build out our the tech stack here, like the thing to say commit depth and the commit SHA. I think we still need to build that out one way or the other, right? Because all of these things that we're discussing are more or less wrappers on top of it, like basically to say, hey, I can give you a Git tag and then we internally figure out what's the commit SHA, or we give you 2 Git tags and we figure out the commit depth. But yeah, I would say maybe the first step really is to have this implemented, and then once we have that stack, we can build wrappers on top of it.
Okay. I agree with that, and I can update the issue with those comments too. Cool. So I had a follow-up on that since we were on the discussion of releases. Because I had been working on Gauge, one of the features in Gauge that was helpful was if you were scanning a release that wasn't the latest, it would give some information on how many versions it is away from the latest, the time away from the latest it is, like, oh, your release that you have is like 3 months older than the latest release, and the number of major versions. So I was thinking maybe there could be a separate check on release, like called release lag, that gives some ranking on the release compared to the latest release. So I know it's not super conventional since Scorecard usually assesses the repo as a whole. So that was something I was just wanted to bring out there. Didn't want to put down an issue yet, wanted to get your thoughts before I did that.
So do you mind just walking me through the API again? Like when you say release lag, is this that the user inputs the current release that they are using, or
Yeah, so for this, it would be built on the scan between two releases. So if you're scanning like 4.0.1 to 4.8.0, then there would be a separate check saying, I don't know, 3 out of 10, because this is months older than the latest release. And it is, yeah, it can make a determination based on how many major versions away it is from the current release.
I see. Yeah, I can give my very high level 2 cents here, right? I think this is not a technical answer, more of a philosophical answer, which is that so far we've been developing Scorecard aimed at like the maintainers, or basically aimed at the repository itself. Like Scorecard is actually checking this posture of a repository. So I think with the release lag thing, it seems like it's a more consumer focused thing to say, hey, this is the release I'm using. How much am I lagging, and like kind of score that. So I feel like there is that conflict in like who this check is built for. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. So I would be a bit hesitant to add that based on that, because I feel like we have always focused more on the maintainers and like actually on the repository more.
Okay. Well, that was helpful. Okay, so that's all I had for that one. Next is discuss about the scorecard action 205.
Yeah, okay.
Question.
So if you don't mind, can you open the I just want to walk through what went wrong and how we're gonna prevent. If you don't mind, can you open the scorecard action? Yeah, right.
Oh, actions.
Yes.
Oops. Oh,
Repository, I mean, sorry.
oh, okay. Do you want me to go to the 205? Where do I go for that?
Yeah, I just scorecard action repository, and I'll walk you through, because like the whole idea is like I released the 205 and it broke. I just fixed that, and I want to be transparent as to what went wrong. So a lesson learned. If you don't mind, can you go to scorecard like on the same URL -action?
Oh, it's a separate repo.
Yeah. If you there was I did a release. If you go to the releases tag, sorry. Yeah, if past, yeah, right. The 205 was released 2 days before, and there was an issue that created that said, hey, there's no, the container, the Docker pull is failing on this. The reason behind this is, if you scroll up a little, sorry, go back to the code. Yeah, I did a 1.19 upgrade for Go. And part of that, within that, the Docker file, I messed up the name, and that never got caught doing PRs. If you scroll down a little, yes, and this is essentially to catch that if somebody messes up the Docker file, this should essentially catch that going forward on that. And also, I'm surprised. Can you go back to the issues, please?
Oh.
Yeah, right. On this, can you click on the issues, please? Yes. Azim, I'm surprised that it should have failed on main. We have an end-to-end on the OSSF test R. For people who don't know, we have an end-to-end test for the action on the main tag, on the main tag, which would essentially pull the Docker container down, run it, make sure it's all fine and dandy. And if it fails, it'll create an issue to say, hey, it failed in the automated test. I went and checked on that, Azim, and somehow that never created an issue. And in fact, I waited for 2 days to do that. I'm surprised how that never got caught up.
Yeah, that is surprising. I think it should have failed. Except the only thing I can think of is if we merged it, because it only runs once every 24 hours. So
yeah, right. But if you think, right, like I probably that's something that I also have to go look at that. Spencer, do you have a comment?
So I mean, there's two end-to-end tests, right? One that pulls the latest tag, and if the Docker build is failing, it's not going to get pushed to the repo and get tagged as latest.
It's
So,
not latest. If you see, we do @main.
Okay.
We don't
Yeah.
do latest. We do @main. So essentially, it should pull that down and should still run a Docker because it runs only because it's a Go project. It's not. It still has to run only a Docker build and do that. And somehow, why I'm bringing this up is in retrospective to make sure that going forward, anytime we release, one is, hey, if we want to tag it, we wait for a day to make sure that we don't release it just like that. There's no second thing is if our tests are not reliable, we figure out what's wrong on the test. That's what I'm trying to think through. I will take this up and I'll write an issue what I figure out. But I would like somebody else to have some pairs of eyes to say, hey, this is where we're missing, instead of just one person looking at that. That's the whole idea, especially in action that's could utilize a lot of people. We don't want to be a project. Oh my God, this is broken second time. We want to avoid that. That's the whole idea.
So yeah, I'm looking at the. So this should have been the scorecard latest release that broke. Yeah, let's debug it. I think.
Yeah, I want to debug it. Yeah, I want to debug it.
Yeah, I'll just ping you. I'll just add this in the notes.
Yeah, I'm going to write an issue. And like that's why I put in a guardrail to make sure the Docker build is working. But that's only one guardrail. We need a guardrail to say it's going to run the test. Like how only then we get warm and fuzzy to say we can release and nothing is the basic tests aren't failing.
Yeah, something is off.
Something is off.
Pick of why.
And also on that note, before we release, we can come up with saying a pre-release and we test this in Scorecard. If everything is fine and dandy, then we do a major release if we agree to that. That's another guardrail which we can put in.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing I can think of is if for some reason there was this unique window such that it never had to pull 2.05 at all.
Sure. Sure. But for now, I'm thinking we at least add every time we don't just do a release, we do a pre-release, make sure we pull that into another PR, like how we have a release notes, what are the steps? There's a little cumbersome manual, but at least that gives us guarantee we're not releasing every day. We are releasing only once a month or something like that. So but it at least gives us not having to go through this again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so FYI, I am looking at the runs and it looks like luckily or unluckily, it never actually had to pull 2.05. It pulled 2.04, and the next run it pulled 2.06, and that's why we never saw a failure.
And I also saw a failure. If you, sorry, if you don't mind, can you go back to that issues? Yes. If you click on the top issue, can you click on the top issue? Yes. Can you click on the workflow run, the one run on the like
Where do I?
no in the issue there's a
It's the second link.
second link. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So this is, and if you click on the jobs, the one that failed, and if you scroll down, this is Recore. Azim, I think this is Recore having some kind of thing wherein it failed. That's why I don't know if this is the 2.05. I don't know. I didn't spend time in looking at this, but this is another one issue. So which is having some reliability issues for us.
Yeah, I think some of this is actually we can't really help it because I think
Sure.
we do depend on Recore. So sometimes if Recore is unable to like verify our certificate, then yeah, then we end up with this 500 error. Yeah, and that's actually why you see it happening only on one of the matrix runs and everything
Yeah.
else is missing.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I think this is a flaky error, and it's
Flaky error. Okay. But I will take an action item to write this new process about we pre-release and do that so that we don't end up doing this. Okay, thanks, Kellen. I'm good with that.
Okay. Great. There's some notes written down, but those are what we discussed, right?
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone have any other items they want to talk about?
How's the Hacktoberfest going?
I think it's going well. I think Spencer might have thoughts too. I think we've had one pull request related to changes in documentation. I don't remember if that's merged in yet, but
It's not merged in because he hasn't done the DCO. So Spencer tagged him on that if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I mentioned it, but I think he merged in a commit to bring in some updates. So when he rebased with the sign off, it didn't get all the commits.
yeah.
But it should be ready other than rebasing it again with sign off on his end.
Yeah, so almost there. As far as I've seen, that's the only activity related to Hacktoberfest. I haven't seen any spam or anything with that, thankfully.
Cool. Thanks for driving this, folks.
Yep.
Azim, we would need some help with that. I've already hit you up with that weight limiting, especially on that keep forgetting what it is. Sorry, I'm going blank. On that PR runs, especially for the Proto C. If not, the dependent PRs are going to pile up more, and we're going to see a lot more failures. I'm going to close some of them just so that we don't see failures.
Yes, I'll take a look at them. I think we're doing something wrong in the way we cache Proto C. I'll take a look at it and try to fix it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Great. Anything else? I think the last thing we usually cover is nominating someone for the next meeting, right? So I think that's November 3rd.
Ryan Russell from Google and I are writing a post in GitHub README. We still have the draft. We are working on that. We will share the draft so for others to read. But we're expecting hopefully for the Linux Foundation Member Summit to have a post about a scorecard. That's one update. Just wanted to let everybody know about that.
So I'll be out for the next few weeks since I'll be in India and mostly won't be able to join. So anyone else wants to take up the facilitator round? Naveen, Spencer.
I can,
Raghav?
if either one of us. Azim, on that note, already our PRs are getting backlogged. Is Lauren going to be back?
Laurent is back, but he's working European time, so you might have you
Yeah,
might see him late in the night, but he's
so-
back. He can help with
So
that.
we should probably get Spencer access to merge, so access to approve.
Yeah, do you mind starting an issue? I
I
mean,
will start an issue. I'll start an issue. So,
Yeah,
or
I'm-
else, also it's going to be everything is going to get backlogged. It's going to become harder. Only one or two maintainers is always going to be harder. So I'm going to start an issue. Spencer, if you don't mind, can you start an issue on 2 upvotes should be good. Azim and I should have consensus.
Yeah, I can make an issue.
Then we should be able to, because then it's public. Azim and I should be able to upvote you, and we should be able to then give you access. Then it should be easier for all of us.
Sounds good. Cool.
Cool.
All right. If that's it, then thanks everyone.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for facilitating.
Thanks.
See you.
See you guys.
Awesome. Great. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.